So I'm going to...
This meeting is being recorded.
Right, so I'm just thanking everybody for joining us this evening. And this is the first public event we're doing for Glimpse. And you're going to be hearing 5 writers this evening who Leone Ross will be introducing you to later and having a chat with. But to start off with, I'd like to invite a really wonderful person that I was introduced to by a friend in New York. It's my friend Tim Fielder introduced me. I kept bugging him, sending him emails saying, you have to introduce me to Reynaldo Anderson because you keep telling me how wonderful he is, and I would like him to write the foreword for this book. So I'm not sure if Tim is in the room yet, but I was so excited to meet Reynaldo because of the work he does, both academically and actively as well. Dr. Reynaldo Anderson is an associate professor at Temple University in the Department of Africology and African American Studies. But he's also the executive director and co-founder of the Black Speculative Arts Movement. And he co-edits a lot of anthologies and journals. And he doesn't work just with, writers in the US. He works with writers in Africa as well, and artists in Africa. And of course, now with us in the UK. So he joined the Peepal Tree Inscribe family. I'm so excited about that. So Reynaldo, I'm just would like maybe you can talk a little bit about where these new Black British writers fit into the Black speculative fiction that you feel that you're so involved with. I think that'll be really interesting for people to know. And then hopefully that when they get the book and they can see your foreword, they'll just realize just how rich the information is that's out there on Black speculative fiction.
Thank you for this invitation. It's hard. I'm thinking of a subject that's so big and how you condense it into a couple of minutes. So I guess I just want to characterize, like when I think of the distinction between Josh's story, how it ends with she cries versus what Muli's story with the scales. What I can see in this project is they're putting a kind of human face on a lot of theoretical ideas people are talking about now around transhumanism or around post-capitalist environment, or in what some people might call, what I know over here we got a term we use called cyberfunk, which is this kind of alienation in late capitalism in the ghetto or in these type of environments. But what I see it also in a historical context, the project goes back to the crisis that speculative writing emerges out of. In the Anglophile tradition, it kind of emerges in London in the 1890s with H.G. Wells and other writers because there was a crisis in British imperialism at the time. However, at the same time, there were a group of Black writers that are kind of responding to this era of global white supremacy at the time. People like Sutton Griggs and other writers that are writing in opposition to this type of white supremacy at the time. And the other thing that I often see, I know, and I've commented it and I've talked about it with Black writers in Europe and Africa and in Latin America, and a talk I gave in Trinidad, is the gaps that seem to occur. Like here on this side of the Atlantic, we talk about how a lot of Black thought is influenced by writers from the Caribbean and in England and in other locales prior to World War II. And then after World War II, it seems to go away for a while, for a couple of generations. And I guess it's that generation that the British Empire brings into England to rebuild the country. And so a certain type of counter narrative or activism that was present before World War II during colonialism is not encouraged after World War II. And so for like a couple of generations, it seemed to go away in an organized context, even though we know there were Black British writers writing about things, but they don't become, a lot of them didn't get their flowers and their notoriety until later in their careers. And then by the time you get to the 90s, I think you get the seeds of this next awakening occur with the emergence of the internet, where people can exchange ideas, where writers like Kojo Ishun, people like Paul Gilroy's work. And this is where I remember, as a graduate student at the time, the white academics used to get on our nerves over here talking about us. Why don't you engage the Black British writers? I'm like, well, they don't live in Daytona Beach, Florida, or something like that at the time, because I think there was some resistance to it, because in the 90s, some of the Black British writers didn't seem angry enough or something like that for our taste at the time, because that was the time of the Million Man March, the Million Woman March, and the other things. So, but it did bring in a context of taking in that concept of the Black Atlantic, which seemed to begin to engage the previous concepts that had been popular for most of the 20th century. And so, but then we get another shift. And I think the glimpse in the writers for this production are reflective of what has emerged in the world the last decade or so, from 2008 onward, where you see a new generation of Black writers and creative people writing in response to the crisis that's abroad in the world today, with problems in how international capitalism works. This period, what they're now over here formally calling deglobalization, Brexit being part of that. And I remember in a conversation that I had with Kojo Ishun in Athens a few years ago, I told him I thought that the European Union project was going to ultimately fail in terms of what it expected, in terms of what Black people believed it could deliver. Because one of the things in a lecture I gave at Rome before the pandemic, I said, you all love Black culture, but you don't mind seeing them drown crossing the Mediterranean. And so that contradiction, I said, was going to lead to a certain type of response to the way the color line works in Europe, in terms of what they will embrace, what they'll reject, and it looks different depending on where you are located. For example, right now, the ideas we're talking about now are increasingly growing popular with African Muslims, in terms of how they want to combine it with their own indigenous African culture to reject the influence of France and the influence of Arab racism and pacts of Islam that are perceived to be anti-Black. And so these regional configurations are emerging and going to be showing up in literature, music, and in community programming right now all over the place. They're doing the same thing in Brazil. And one of the things that it goes back to, Glimpse is a part of the movement to claim ownership or control or influence over the Black imagination. Because one of the things we talk about in the movement is before we physically pursue some type of liberatory objective, it has to start in your imagination first. So the big struggle now is how do you prevent co-optation, or what some philosophers call elite capture of the imagination, where are the things that we create with our imagination there to serve our interests or the interests of other people? Like, for example, I'm very pleasantly surprised. I just found out in the last few days that one of my favorite programs that came out of Britain the last few years, I really like that program, Noughts and Crosses, in terms of, and I understand they're going to have the second season come out, and we'll be able to see it over here soon after. And it caught, and that kind of stuff caught everybody over here by surprise, because until these recent times, we never, and a friend of mine, Natasha Kennedy from Germany, says a lot of times the dialogue seems to primarily go between the diaspora and Africa in terms of these things. And the Black Europeans aren't really a big part of the discussion in terms of the speculative imagination, because the brothers and sisters in Africa seem to treat Europe like that's the promised land, milk and honey, and happily ever after once they get there. But what has happened in the last decade or so, that is turning out not to be true. Mm-hmm. And so now a glimpse is a part of what is coming out of Europe now, of a unique voice of people of African descent now that live in the African, or that live in these capitals of London, Paris, Berlin, and Rome, and Madrid, and Athens, that have their own, they're writing from that location, and they're putting particular sensibilities on those stories that are have us rethinking those issues that people are dealing with in Black speculative fiction. And that's the word that came to mind for me, particularly when it came to Britain. I'm thinking, I call it, glimpses AC, after Commonwealth. You know?
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you right there, Reynaldo, because I'm gonna bring you back in later. But just let people know the Noughts and Crosses, a lot of people know as Mallory Blackman, and there is gonna be an exhibition at the British Library with her work later on in the year, November, that we are also gonna link with, to let people know about that. So I'm sorry to stop you prematurely, Reynaldo, but we're gonna talk to you again a bit later too. So I'm gonna hand over now as well. It's great, people are putting all their stuff in the chat, thank you. I'm gonna now introduce Leone, the wonderful Leone Ross. And when I was asked I needed to do the next anthology for Inscribe, the next fiction one, I just knew it was gonna be, well, I knew I wanted to have Leone as the editor, and I knew it was gonna be speculative fiction. So excited. And you know, Leone has also got her latest works out as well, One Sky Day, but in the States it's called, is it Poppy Show? Poppy Show. I just love that title, and that to me was more Leone's title. So if you haven't got that yet, you need to go get that too. And then this, so you can see, when you read that, you can see why she's just like the best person to have edited this book as well, because we worked together for many times, like with Sable as well, and she was a fiction editor for me for a long time. So I'm now handing over to you, Leone, for you to introduce the writers that you selected to be in this groundbreaking book. Thank you.
Thank you, darling. Thank you for the introduction. So I suppose I'm not going to say very much to introduce myself, simply that this is, there's no question that this is a work of very hard work. I have spent a couple of years beating up many of our writers, who I genuinely think are the best of the best, are astounding minds. As Reynaldo was talking about, the ways that we have opportunities to control our own imaginations and to make really important statements about the world and about the way that we are experiencing the world as Black people through this wonderful genre, which of course is just an umbrella term for everything from magical realism to sci-fi to cyberpunk and so on. Speculative fiction is. So I was delighted to be invited to edit this collection. And excited, and I'm so glad that it's finally with us. And I encourage all of you, Valentine's Day, for the purposes of simply telling someone you love them or you want to freak them out a little bit, please do get out there and support Peepal Tree and support these wonderful, hungry, fabulous 21 voices that we see in this collection. So the way that the bulk of the evening, ladies and gentlemen, is going to work is that I am going to introduce each reader, each writer, who's going to read about 5 minutes of their work approximately. I will then ask them a question and invite them to respond to that question for a further 5 minutes or so, have a little chat, and then I'll move on to the next person. And we have 5 writers to listen to this evening. So I encourage you to grab a drink, make sure you are muted, and have a good time. Have your first glimpse, for many of you, into Glimpse. So the first writer I would like to introduce is Muli Amaye. And Muli Amaye is the coordinator of the MFA in creative writing at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad. Her first novel, A House with No Angels, was published by Crocus in 2019. Muli writes short stories, novels, and poetry. Her story, Fish Scales, for our collection Glimpse, is a fascinating, funny, touching story of a wonderfully defiant woman in a nursing home who wakes up to some intriguing physical changes. Inviting you to read for us, please, Muli.
Thank you. When Chi-Chi woke up that morning, she suspected it wasn't going to be an ordinary day, partly because the light was already seeping under the bottom of the room's two short curtains and she never woke this late, partly because the pain in her body, her forever companion, was gone, but mostly because of the two large fish scales glittering on her bedside table. They were a sign. Chi-Chi moved her head slowly, testing her new body. Not one pain touched a muscle or a joint. She laughed loudly. Her rickety headboard banged against the wall with each chuckle, making her laugh harder. Thump, thump. Delighted, she began moving her legs under the heavy covers, kicking, and then flinging the covers off with abandon. Thump, thump. The door flew open. It was Stella, her dedicated carer. Lord Jesus, God Almighty, what is this now, Miss Chi-Chi? I was thinking you have a man in here or taking a fit. What a thing now. Chi-Chi stopped laughing, her mouth wide enough to show the gummy gaps at the back. She pulled her legs together and smoothed the ruffled sheet back over them before the girl could reach out. Chi-Chi rearranged her face, letting it settle back into its crevices, forehead to chin. It's a good job I wasn't entertaining, banging into my room like that. No respect, you young people. None at all, at all. Come now, Miss Chi-Chi, your entertaining days long gone now. It's my job to make sure you're okay. Chi-Chi dug deep for her most withering look to fling at the uppity girl, but she couldn't find one. There was an unfamiliar feeling of lightness pulsing through her body. Pushing herself up on frail arms, her triceps hung like old net curtains. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and searched for her slippers. She could feel Stella's eyes on her bowed head, glanced up to see the girl gaping. Chi-Chi couldn't help but chuckle again. When was the last time she swung anything? Go and boil the kettle, there's a good girl. I'm fancying a nice cup of tea. Stella hesitated. Close your mouth, dear, you're causing a draught. Slippers in place, Chi-Chi slid easily from the bed. She glanced at the fish scales on her bedside table before striding into the bathroom. And that was the start of the best day she could ever remember having. Sliding into the communal lounge, Chi-Chi scanned the wing chairs looking for the missing, for those who had succumbed to the eternal overnight. On average, 2 a month disappeared, but they were all there this morning, nodding and grinning. Chi-Chi shouted good mornings, giggling as she waltzed over to her usual place. She could feel those fish scales, not just on her skin, but inside too. There was one on each big toe, then on her earlobes, even her nipples. She glanced around coyly before rubbing a thumb over each one, shivering with delight. The scales slid to her temples and circled anti-clockwise in a satisfying head massage kind of way. She sighed appreciatively. When breakfast was over, Chi-Chi stood up and declared she was going out into the garden. Stella frowned. Well, Miss Chi-Chi, it's cold out at this time. Wait now. Let the sun come round. The boy due to do some pruning. You don't want to be out there for that. She was not waiting. There was nothing to wait for. It had to be done. In her room, Chi-Chi dug through the wardrobe until she found her outside shoes. They were covered in dust. The laces were fraying at the ends as though nibbled through. Sitting in the old Morris chair, she used the corner of her dress to wipe off the dust. A large tilapia sidled out of her left shoe, flapped its way across the floor and into the back of the wardrobe. The fish didn't look well, not quite as iridescent as it should. She supposed the cupboard was where it lived, which meant it definitely wasn't getting enough light. But there was no time to think about that now. She had to go outside. Flicking off her slippers, she shook out the right shoe to make sure it was empty before stuffing her feet in and tying the laces tightly. She marveled at her working fingers, stretched them this way and that. Her hands were pain-free. What a thing. Taking her wool coat from the back of the door, Chi-Chi glanced at the bedside table. She was sure the fish scales winked at her, which didn't make sense because they weren't eyes. But not much of anything made sense this morning, and that was okay.
Thank you so much, Muli. Ah, you've done it. Yes, congratulations.
Yes.
I tell you what stays with me, that particular image of that fish flopping out of her shoe always stays with me when I think about that story. My question to you is maybe a complex one, maybe a simple one. What do you most want readers to notice about this, your story? That could be thematic, it could be a particular sentence that you love or an idea or something else. What do you want us to notice?
Okay. This whole story for me is about secrets. It's about aging. It's about dying. I have to say, I seem to be obsessed with As I Lay Dying, William Faulkner. And so this story kind of came out of that, in that there's one chapter in there that says, "My mother is a fish."
Yeah.
And it's very much grown from that, and also from the fact that I spent 2 weeks sitting with my mum in the hospital while she was dying. She took a long time to die, which was it was really interesting because I know my mum. I knew my mum, and I knew that there were secrets that she kept. I knew that there were things that she carried with her, and we only saw one perspective of who she was. And I think that in all families, people carry secrets. My grandma carried secrets. I could not find out anything about my older family because people were holding on to things. It's like, you don't need to know that. This is not your business, or this is gone because Jesus has cleansed me of everything, so I don't need to talk about that anymore. And it was all that kind of thing. So for this story, I want people to understand that others have an inner life that we know nothing about.
Yeah, women, older women who
yeah.
who they misunderstand or underestimate.
Yes. We carry things, and there are things that we don't tell our children because we don't want them to do certain things, or because we're ashamed of things that we did. And I think that this is very much the thing for Chi-Chi. I love Chi-Chi. This character, she came to me, and I fell in love with her. And even to her name, it's like, I don't know if that name's right, but she wouldn't change her name either. And I just love the defiance within her. I love the fact that she gets right to the end, and at the end, she goes back to the beginning. She goes back to that stage of having to leave a child and then having to deny that child all throughout. And yeah, it's very much about family secrets and appreciating women who are older.
Was any part of it difficult in the context of things that you think are important that you don't want us to miss? Because sometimes there are things we desperately want to say, and then the hardest things to come out for us. So, or was it smooth, like a fish flopping out of a shoe? Or
It was definitely like a tilapia. This story just wrote itself, and then I had to go back and do some short edits here and there. And obviously we worked together and did those edits. But the story wanted to be told. And for me, it's really interesting because it is my mum's death story, but it's absolutely nothing to do with that, but it's everything to do with that.
Everything to do with that. Do you think Mum would have liked it? Would she have read it?
She would have read it and not understood a word of it.
Right.
But I think it came out as speculative as well, because Quite often when I was sitting with her in the hospital, she would start talking about people that were side of the room that she was seeing in her imagination. And so there was no other way to tell this story other than speculative, because she was privy to things that I was not privy to. She was privy to walking through a tunnel, and I said, "Oh, what was at the end, Mum? What was at the end? Like, tell me." And yes, she had all of these things going on as she was going on that journey. And so for me, Miss Chi-Chi is going on that journey. And maybe she is going and walking around and going into the garden, or maybe she's just lying in her bed. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. I think what I love is as a final point is that idea that Mum's story in all its glory couldn't have been told in any other genre than this one. It needed the space, it needed the audacity, it needed the fun, it needed all of that. It lends itself to such a beautiful love of this genre and our place in it and our mother's places in it, you know. I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Muli. Thank you for reflecting on this with us and sharing that. Thank you. Okay, the second writer I'm going to introduce is Koye Oyedeji. Koye, hello, my dear. Koye is a writer who splits his time between London and Washington, D.C. He's contributed to a number of anthologies and literary journals. He's currently at work on a full-length project. I feel your pain, Koye. I know how that feels. His piece, For Glimpse, is called Children's Story. It tells the tale of a young boy literally haunted by looming sexuality and the toxic life of his elder brother. Koye, I'm inviting you to read, please, from Children's Story.
Thank you. It starts with Kim. Even though Emeka is expecting her, he is still startled by her presence in his bedroom, the way she steps around the strewn clothes like a guest, but then sits on his bed as if she's done it 100 times before, parking her jacksie on the Thundercats quilt cover that was, up until this moment, his pride and joy. Now he's just embarrassed by it. "You're all right," she says, but he doesn't reply. He's eyeing the straight hair pulled into a bun, the hooped earrings, the loose Coca-Cola rugby shirt that hangs off her body, the snatch of her bra strap, the tight pull of laces on her high-tech squash. He's thinking about her outside of these things, or maybe in just some of these things. In the shirt, but without the jeans. In the jeans, but without the shirt. He's thinking about all of these things he's seen in the crumpled and tattered magazines he has pulled from beneath his brother's mattress, all the theatrical squills and frills on VHS cassettes. "We're doing it here," his older brother had announced just half an hour ago. But Emeka hadn't actually let that sink in until now. His brother, Junior, had been errant even before their father left. But now he was just setting records and popularizing cliches, making history, taking prisoners, raising hell. Emeka never hears of any of it firsthand, but there are stories, hand-me-downs from the elder boys in the area, mostly delivered with disbelief and wonder. "I heard your brother took patients up to Gilbert's flat, man, while Gilbert's mom was in hospital overnight for knee surgery. Is it true Junior juked Aida on the roof of the Wendover building?" Emeka doesn't know. He's only ever witnessed the epilogues, fights between Junior and other boys, boys recently jilted, boys with bruised egos who had done the jilting and regretted it in Junior's wake. Today is about as involved as Emeka has ever been in his brother's affairs. He has done as instructed, as ordered, brought the VCR into his bedroom, which doubles as a guest room ever since their mother had them move the old bed in from her room. Junior said he was going to need it. Emeka's bed, the bed that their parents once slept on. A double bed, said Junior, to be clear and cruel. He was coming back, first with Kim and then with Gilbert. And when he returned the second time, he wanted Emeka to disappear from the bedroom, from the flat, and maybe, if Emeka was feeling generous, from his life altogether. "Make like a ghost," Junior said. And though it isn't yet ghost time, Emeka is startled nonetheless at Kim turning up, the first girl to ever set foot in his bedroom, and it shows. She crosses her legs, smoothens out the creases to either side of her, and high arches an eyebrow at the single-sized quilt on a double bed. Then she gives him a look, as if to say, "What are you staring at me for?" And to be certain he understands, she says, "What are you staring at me for?" He quails, words escaping, movement too. You'd think she was holding a shotgun to him. But if he cannot be confident, then perhaps he can be kind, a superhero in waiting. He considers what's at stake. Junior will return with Gilbert, that's the plan. And though he will be kicked out of his own bedroom and will not witness these things, he knows what they are. He knows that they will try and convince Kim to do it with the both of them. He knows what doing it means. He's 12, not 2. Old enough to use the word convince, to know that Kim is unaware of Junior's designs, that it's unlikely she wouldn't be there if she was. Patience has since moved off the estate, sent home to live with her dad in Ghana. He wouldn't want Kim to feel as if she needed to leave the area. She doesn't have to. He can bring the Superman vibrations, save her from a disaster, drag her from the rails, avoid the oncoming train. As simple as, open your mouth, tell her it's a lie. Tell her there is no pirate copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Tell her that Junior is on his way back with Gilbert. Tell her, Kim, you need to leave. You need to get out while you can and go quickly, now.
Ah, Koye, thank you for that, my dear. Yeah, that one always gets me. And you know, I've read it, and it always gets me in the guts. Thank you for that, our little superhero in waiting, really, Amaye. So my question for you is, I suppose, in a way, it's slightly personal one. We may not agree on this, but I believe as writers that we're eternally in process, that we're kind of constantly learning things about ourselves and our craft, and that happens for our entire lifetime. If that idea resonates with you, I'd love to know, or invite you to say what this story represents for you as a writer on your own path, in your own process, and to react to that in any way that feels good for you.
It very much does resonate with me. I truly believe that most things in the world are fluid, including our relationship as writers to the world around us, and even our previous works. I think this story, in that sense, this story to me almost signified to me, as well as some other work that I've been working on, is that my ephemeral relationship with place and time, particularly as it pertains to home. And I say that as someone who has been gone from the UK now for 15 years. And I think that we are always having conversations with the past, but those conversations are a lot of the time informed by who we are in the present moment.
Yes.
And having sort of this gap, like having not experienced, and maybe this is a blessing, a post-millennial Tory UK.
Oh, it is definitely a blessing, my love, you know that.
Having not experienced the pandemic in the UK, having sort of missed out on so much, I think that my conversation with the UK, even to go back into the 80s, and you'll see that I do that in the work, I pull out a lot of identifiers.
Yes, it's such an 80s story, and I love that, yeah.
And that's a purposeful move on my part, because it's an attempt to have that conversation. And I think the speculative in some ways allows me to make that conversation a little bit more satisfying, because I do find that my relationship to the UK has become, it feels like it's been put on a pause. And I think that the way that I try to address that, I found once I moved to the US and I continued my writing, the more and more I wrote about the UK, the more and more it sat in this period of time.
And the more and more it invites itself, therefore, to the speculative to have that conversation.
Reynaldo was talking about the Black imagination, and I just feel we historically we have been very transient, right? Whether that's we've been called as slaves, or we've migrated in waves like the Windrush, and I think that addressing those relationships, addressing that movement has allowed, I think that the Black speculative fiction, a lot of it is about addressing how we are transient beings as a diaspora.
I love that. I love that. But I mean, of course, I love anything that supports and applauds this form, but it makes a lot of sense for me for this story. Again, we almost have an echo of what Muli has said. The form, the kind of writing supports the experience, supports your particular diasporic experience. Is there anything else you want to tease us with about this story before I shift on to the next person? Because it's a big one and a complex one and a brave one.
Well, I remember the process. It was and we had to actually strip particular layers from it. I will say, and it goes back to the idea of fluidity. One of the things that I felt also informed this story was this idea. I thought a lot about emotions and how I guess we need to categorize them in order to try and understand them. But as we sort of, I began more and more to think about them as in a way that we think about colors and the kind of cocktails that can emerge when mixed. It can be a sort of a strong red, or it can be a sort of a pink. And I really tried to think about emotions when combined, and how we don't have words for these different kind of cocktails that are formed. Like I feel one part anger, one part envy, 2 parts embarrassment, right?
There is no word for that. And but the color is even more expressive. Yeah, because you can imagine an off-white with a little red dot in the corner, and then
exactly. And so something about that sort of toxic masculinity and the relationship to women, and that signifies, and of course I encourage you all to buy the book and read the story, kind of, and the yen, the kind of this abstract spirit that emerges is born out of this kind of weird
emotions.
cocktail. So
Koye, thank you, my love. Thank you for the story. Thank you for the reflections. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we are moving along. I am going to introduce our third writer. Gemma Weeks is the author of the novel Love Me, published by Chatto and Windus, as well as proud mama, poet, playwright, multidisciplinary performer and screenwriter. My girl's clever as hell. She is working on her second book, an experimental verse novel entitled Grigri. Her story for Glimpse, Dying of Thirst, introduces us to a poet riding the wave of new success, and amongst other things, the vampire that's watching her from the sidelines. Inviting you to read, Gemma, please.
The gospel must begin in the middle and ugly, just like this. With my feeling that life had its back to me, standing in the chill, in the trash-bagged alley by the back entrance of the Wendigo Club, where I screamed at my manager, Portia, to drown out the trouble I felt coming like dogs feel a storm. Where the fuck? Pronounced so hard the words bounced off the sidewalk and rolled into the gutter. Is my rider. You got everything you wanted. No, I did not. Where's the pineapple juice? Because I'd worked so damn hard to matter, and it was time everyone knew I mattered. And Miss Portia Devlin didn't get it, had never suffered like I had to be a real someone, a real person with insides, who drank real goddamn juice. They had 3 cartons of it. Fresh squeezed is what I asked for. She was about to find out what suffering was if she kept fucking me over. My stomach was all acid. I should have been relaxing before my performance. Instead, I was out in the piss-smelling alley, having to do everybody's job, and it was all one long, drawn-out indignity. Mardu, I need it for my vocal cords. I'm on it. It'll be there by the time you get back to the dressing room. Rob just went out to buy it. It's disrespectful. I put it on the fucking rider. I had to yell to get the words past the tension in my throat. The world behind Portia shook and contracted. If it was Kerouac's white ass doing a performance here, would they have just made a mistake? If I were a better mother to myself, I'd have remembered. Be suspicious of what you want. And if I'd known how dangerous it was to get what I wanted, I'd have taken off right then, running toward the sea, over cracked and bleeding sidewalks, giving flowers to derelicts, humming miles kind of blue under a sky reddened by city lights, until concrete gave way to the beach, belonging to myself, the way the sea belongs to itself at night, polluted, but alive. I wouldn't have been afraid of the kid or so contemptuous of what I already had. Are you really still pissed about the kid? He's hot shit right now, Mardu. We can't afford to. If that's what I meant, then that's what I would have said. But it's clear you're still, I don't need you to repeat yourself. The wind muscled in on our conversation, slicing through my dress, carrying with it the rotten memory of struggle. Look, Mardu, Portia sucked on her cigarette in that anxious way she did when nervous or mad, her pale mouth puckered like an asshole. Do you understand how huge this is? Tossing her dishwater hair, blowing clouds of toxins. You're a prize-winning, best-selling author and performance artist. You've landed the Wendigo Club. Could you even get in here 3 months ago? So I should just be grateful like a good little nigger. Look, the juice is already probably in the dressing room. I'll have a word and make sure this doesn't happen again. Her eyes are hard and unflinching, the way a manager's eyes should be, windows into an emptiness so vast it could only fill itself with money. Those eyes were why I hired her. I wanted all the coin I could stuff into every gaping schism, every fracture, every laceration of my life so far. I wanted to sweat quarters and fart dollar bills. I wanted to be so armored with money that if a motherfucker scratched me, I'd bled green. And I was so damn close. Less than an hour before, I'd been a goddess, sliding up to the curb in a limo like Venus surfing her clamshell, stepping out of the scent of leather into clouds of praise. Mardu! The who's who of NYC pressed cheeks and palms with me, slipping me business cards and compliments, touched my hands, arms, waist, hair. You must meet so-and-so, such a fan. Bouncers who'd once blocked my passage now bowed and scraped, ushered me with muscled nods into a red room fat with couches, slit with mirrors, artwork yawning open from every wall, each a window into someone's skull. And then I saw him, Zeus. He had come. God of the underworld, glittering at the bar like a shard of glass, club owner and suspected pimp, philosopher, aficionado of illegal substances, cinephile, art appreciator and patron, skin white as a fresh bleached skeleton and cheekbones to match. Rarely seen even here at his own establishment in a suit that cost the GDP of a small country, youngest heir of the wards, a line of vampires that could be traced all the way back to medieval Europe. All my hard work had been for this. But before I could reach his side, Zeus shifted to reveal a young man standing next to him. I recognized him right away by how he stood, which was like his mother. Soft bent neck of his mother, in his long black coat, soft black skin, his skyward column of hair. It was the kid. Fuck, fuck, fuck. They spoke intently. The kid laughed as if he were shy, his mother's quiet, accusing laugh, soft and suspicious of everybody, because soft. I had seen him from around corners, from safe distances. I'd seen him nodding out on park benches in the Bowery, peddling his ass to lonely old men. Fuck, fuck, fuck. I hung back. What was the kid doing here? Just the shape of him made me feel poor and crazy like his mother, who, rumor had it, was in the hospital with a broken soul. I pulled Portia close. Do you know that kid?
Mm-hmm. Hello, my darling. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yes, it's not just expletives that are evidence of bravery, of course. You've got plenty of them, and you know that I love them, and I think used judiciously, they're gorgeous. But I want to ask you, because this piece, all the way through the process, from the first time I read it, I just thought, she's so brave. How does a writer get to be brave?
I've been thinking about this, and I would argue actually that it's probably the same things that make a human brave. That's the first step, which is having the courage to see ourselves as we are. You know, it seems like a small thing, but I think that it's so difficult to not see ourselves the way that we wish we were,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on the one side,
Mm-hmm.
or the way that we fear we are on the other side. But to be able to see ourselves as we are, you know, our goodness, our smallness, our cruelty. And I think that's the basis of being able to see other people as they are. And, you know, and I think being able to see ourselves and also have compassion is the first step, I think.
And then put that into the art. So
yeah,
the exactly. Vision becomes a way into the art, or becomes something that you do on the page.
Yes, exactly. Because I think, you know, I was having a conversation actually today about originality and just saying that, you know, it's not something to shoot for. I think if you shoot for being true, like telling the truth, it will be original.
Always.
Because like life is so nuanced and so strange and so ephemeral and so subjective that if you are connected to yourself and your own experience and are able to see that then and express that, then you will be brave. You know, it will be brave, because most of us are terrified to show who we are.
Yeah.
Terrified.
Yeah.
It's,
which is understandable. Which is understandable. Yeah.
It's not easy out here.
Do you feel brave? I mean, I've made a huge assumption there, asking you for your almost your advice, but do you feel brave as a writer?
To be honest, I'm coming to the end of my book, and I feel like a one-ply sheet of tissue paper at this point. I feel that thing just blow up, just fall apart, because it is such hard work. I think, to be honest, it's a comment on what bravery really is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when I think of the word brave, there's still a 6-year-old part of me that's like, just, you know, pose. But I feel brave in as much as I keep going.
Yeah.
I keep going even though it's incredibly difficult and incredibly hard. I keep going. And I think that that's really all you can ask of yourself.
And do you think dying of thirst is true and perhaps therefore brave?
Yeah, I love this question in relation to speculative fiction, because it is obviously, it's imagination and it's, you know, going on flights of fancy that you would not put together necessarily with truth. But I do feel like the wonderful thing about speculative fiction is that you're able to access other species of truths, you know, like the things that are niggling, the things that you just want to pick at, the ideas that you want to pick at, but in such efficient ways. You know what I mean? Because I felt like with this, I feel like it was true in the sense that I wanted to examine some ideas about what it means to be an artist in a world where we have to commodify ourselves to survive. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And via speculative fiction, I'm able to get there quickly and with very graphic lines.
Yeah, it's hella efficient, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
You're there. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gemma, thank you very much, as usual, my darling, for being brave and being true. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. We are aware of the time, ladies and gentlemen, but we were always going to do this Black people style-y, definitely. So please do stay with us if you can. Particularly stay with us for writer number 4 of 5. I would love to introduce to you Ni Ayikwei Parks. Ni is a Ghanaian writer and editor who has won acclaim for his work as a children's writer, poet, broadcaster, and novelist. Ni has also published a leading crop of UK poets, so he can show off for this as well, including Nick Makoha, Malika Booker, Neil O'Sullivan, and Warson Shear, as founder of Flipped Eye Publishing. Ni's story for Glimpse is the tenderest, most violent tale of a man whose mind will not be imprisoned. Ni, I'm inviting you to share your work with us, please.
Thank you, Leonie. Thanks to everyone for being here. And yeah, it's great to be part of this family. Incandescence. Things had been going badly at Abu Salim. The inmates glowed with cheer, their sallow cheeks elastic and animated over their bones. The guards had questioned over 1,000 men. Why? Why? Using every trick they had learned in their long careers as jailers and torturers, and every single prisoner, even if they were in separate wings and had not seen each other for over a decade, gave the same response. The answer had the guards doubting their years of training and torture. Prisoner 13874 said every man, Ziad. When told that Ziad was in solitary confinement, that he had been for 5 years, the inmates laughed. Laughed? Laughter under torture. Who ever heard of such a thing? And yet, when they went down narrow steps to check, there Ziad was, as he always was, staring at the single bulb in the cell, left illuminated to ensure prisoner 13874's sleep was never complete. It was small and terrible acts such as perpetual lighting that had given the guards of the old fort their reputation. Like other such prisons around the world, they were known for hooding, rectal rehydration, pop torture, using the worst 70s songs, waterboarding, and cramped confinement. But it was their attention to the smallest deprivations that made them unique. So Ziad was not given the water a good Muslim needs for his ablutions, but fragments of newspaper. He wiped gingerly, conscious of the ink and transient news that might be absorbed by his backside. The discarded clumps of paper piled in a corner of his solitary cell, clustered like the first incomplete structures of a new city. Unsurprisingly, the lights kept dying out. Ziad would watch the wide bottom bells of the bulbs turn darker over time, a gradual shift from the pale yellow stain of a new smoker's fingers to a light charcoal. The transition was barely perceptible to an ordinary user. A bulb only noticed when it failed to do its duty. After flicking the switch a couple of times to be sure of what was already clear, a hand would reach for the spent bulb and twist it out of its usual orbit. Ziad watched the guards fetching a high ladder to reach the light fixture dangling from the 18-foot ceiling. Once the bulb was out, darkened fingers would shake it, setting off the distant, unmistakable death rattle of a broken tungsten filament. For Ziad, each bulb was a fallen sun, a broken regime, each change tossing him into a new universe. Although it hurt his eyes to stare, the slow undoing of the bulbs was his way of marking time. From the first yellowing, if he counted down to its eventual demise. If they'd used good quality supplies at the old fort, each regime of light would have lasted as much as 3 months, but the average time was no more than 2. He knew he'd outlast many more bulbs. He wouldn't break. Ziad was meant to burn out in the inert vacuum of solitary confinement, but he had made his peace with his position. There was no anger to burn, just resignation. He would not apologize for something that was true just to see the sun again. If the guards valued literature, they would have realized that what they provided him with to clean his buttocks was entertainment. It also told Ziad what the guards confiscated. he got their leftovers, what they didn't read or study or couldn't imagine. For instance, there was a paper that appeared every month with jokes and crossword puzzles in French, which was clearly meant for one of his fellow inmates. The language reminded Ziad of Rousseau, reminded him what it was like to speak to a room full of philosophy students. From these fragments of newsprint, he read about a massacre in Dunblane in Scotland, a major oil spill on the east coast of the United States of America, plane accidents far and near in Peru, Nigeria, the USA, Congo, India, and the Dominican Republic. He read squatting over the metal bowl provided for him, his thighs solidifying as he learned about strong men like Mugabe and Museveni winning elections in their petrified countries. It wasn't common for him to touch the paper after he'd used it to clean, but on this day, the photograph on the balled up newspaper was so unusual that Ziad wrinkled his nose and reached for the crushed sheet with his left hand. Using the foot to trap the corner of the paper, he stretched it out, his shit streaks making unintended art on one side. Luckily, the image was unobstructed because it was on the reverse. As he thought, it was a picture of a bulb, but it didn't look like any he'd seen before. It whispered from the middle of an advert by a company called Shanghai Shangshang Limited, looking for a local distributor for a new kind of light bulb that used a fraction of the usual energy. It was a spiral, like a fluorescent tube, thin as mishabik, wound into the form of a bulb, a shape-shifting light. Ziad stared at the picture for a long, long time, then crumpled the paper again, kicking it into the week's mountain excretory heap.
Thank you so much, Renée. Hi.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, for those who, of course, haven't read this story yet, Incandescence, which is actually I've placed as last in the collection. I did that for many reasons, because, of course, the process of putting together a collection is multi-layered and you make decisions for a zillion reasons. But I will say this, I put Incandescence, your story, last because of its tremendous hope and value to hope, ultimately. But I would like you, for this one, to talk to me about the importance of tenderness for you, because it may not be evident to people listening to this, having listened to shit-streaked art. But this is actually a tender, beautiful, hopeful, story that breaks my heart every time. Talk to me about tenderness and you as a writer, Renée, please.
Tenderness. I've come to see tenderness as the strongest thing on earth. It's very odd because I lost my father very early, and there was a lot of pain, and I discovered vulnerability, and I think I spent years trying not to be vulnerable, and then I had to find that again. And then, there were lots of other tools that I used, but I then, as an adult, broke, a very important relationship, and it's a relationship you can't break. And as adults, you break relationships that you can't break. It's like, you can have an argument with your family, but you still got blood, right? That type of thing. And initially, I think I felt a lot of anger, but the anger was making me tired.
Yeah.
And I really thought about it. And I thought about the people involved and how our relationships had begun, right? And I started to find that tenderness allowed me to see them, to see where they were coming from, whether they were angry at me, whether, and that I could take everything that was coming and still be generous and still stand my ground.
Yes.
And it started to make me think of tenderness differently and to be tender towards people in life generally. That's, for me, tenderness is the core of everything. And it's changed how I write as well, because, I even my worst characters, I think, where is their tenderness? And that's, I think that's what informs the story.
Yeah. Do you experience Incandescence as a tender story, or is that just me?
I do. I think the reason why Ziad can't be broken is because he carries so much tenderness in him.
Yeah.
And the reason why the gods can't understand him is they leave their tenderness at home. And yes. There's a line there about them not wanting to name the prisoners, which shows that they do have tenderness, but they decide, hey, that stays out the door.
They have to create things that will protect them from the tenderness, because
exactly,
really that's where the vulnerability is, and that,
So so for me, that's, you know, it's a really important thing. And I mean, it's interesting because you start to, even when you read history, you know, you kind of, it changes the way you look at history. It changes how much you can be bamboozled by history.
That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
You know, if you look at the story of, you know, of enslavement and transport of Africans to the New World, and people try and tell you, you know, the convention in studies of the Black diaspora is the conventional knowledge that we're given is people came with no skills and they don't remember anything of Africa and stuff like that. But you cannot, unless somebody stops breathing, they don't lose what they came from. People had children, they had to raise them, they had to give them something. Okay, so if, you know, I mean, the funniest thing is, like, if people have forgotten everything, how come they're still braiding their hair, right? The rice that made America's wealth, Carolina gold, is West African. So somebody took this and thought, I will plant this. Somehow I will remember home. You know, that all of that, through all that suffering, the resistance is tenderness. And it's not tenderness towards, you know, just, it's not, I mean, there's tenderness towards the people that enslaved them, because I think things could have been very messy, right?
Yeah,
but primarily is the tenderness of family, in spite of the general insistence on breaking family all the time.
Yeah.
You know, people.
That's why that was one of the first ways they tried to break us, because they broke our families.
Yeah, and
I mean, I'm going to interrupt you, my love. Because
thank you. It's been lovely.
This is a gorgeous story, and all of them are special. This one fills me with a huge amount of tenderness for you and respect for your work and your writing hand, my darling. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, guys, so now we come to that cliche of last but definitely not least. Our fifth and final writer and reader this evening is Joshua Idehen. Joshua Idehen is a poet, teacher, and musician. A British-born Nigerian, his poetry has been published alongside Linton Kwesi Johnson and Anthony Joseph. He recently collaborated with The Comet Is Coming and Sons of Kemet on their Mercury-nominated albums. He is an astonishing performer and an extremely talented musician and poet. His deliciously dark story, Green Eye for Glimpse, imagines a predatorial London and a very unusual drink, inviting you to be the last but not least of our readers tonight. Josh, please.
2200 hours. Her tip meter shines light amber on the top left of her vision. It reads 0. Her rent due is bright red on the top right. It blinks £10,000. FH thrusts her cold fingers into the ice sink, grabbing cubes, dropping them into a rocks glass. She trembles. Customer bastard says, lay off the Charlie, yeah? She smiles back, strokes her temple, bunches up her shoulders and giggles, like what he said was funny, like he's a funny guy, yeah? Bacardi, sugar soda, stare. A serviette under the glass, routine. 103, she tells him. Customer bastard is full disgusted. You're having a laugh? She giggles again for him, shrugs, rolls her eyes. Yeah, I know, right? Madness. She clicks her lip lights on, and her mouth glows an inviting strawberry red. She gambles on him liking the color. In the nightclub dark, he wouldn't have noticed her mouth before, and wow, she's got lips on her. He grins like a sneer, big ugly bastard grin. Boom, boom, she has him now. It's in the pocket. His eyes glow NatWest red. Her eyes glow Barclays Bank blue. It's gonna be a good one. Transaction, a brief, blinding flash. She styles out the pain as a cheeky wink. Swallows spit, holds her smile. Cash register jingle tickles her ear. The payment scrolls past in bright blue at the bottom of her sight. 103, no tip. He blows her a kiss, no tip. His slappable grin, no fucking tip. He leaves. Behind his back, her smile nods. The tip meter is 0. Her rent meter blinks in sync with James Brown's sex machine. She fears. 2,300 hours. Tip meter is 400. Customer bastard after customer bastard after customer bastard and bitch. Effie has winked 77 times so far. To keep her life together, she needs £15,000. That will pay for rent and bills, but will not cover food. She's made that much before, many times before. She's made more with her eyes closed. Saturday nights long ago. She knows how to wine and dine customer bastards. Lip lights for the pervs, cheek lights for the pedos, lash lengths for the romantics. And for trads, bants, twirls, and giggles. Mix and match as and when. With her eyes closed, she's made miracles. But tonight, it's all going a bit R. Kelly. Her flirting sounds stale. She's unbuttoned her top, though, right down to the joint of her bra, but customer bastards won't look. She's gotten older. That's the problem, isn't it? Cheek lights won't do it for the pedos no more. Only 400 in tips. She started at 6 p.m. Happy hour ended at 7 and brought nothing with it. The bastards on her bar station are cheap one-rounders. Lovely D's doing majestic business on the e-counter. Lisa's station is rammed. Lisa spammed a print screen of her tip meter to the barmaid group chat. 18,000. Effie is the only one having a shit night. Minutes crawl on their bellies. Music chews her ears. Customer bastards, glass eyes on Lovely D's ease, only ask for water pints. It's 11:15. The body keeps walking. The mind scrambles for plan B. She cannot pay the rent on 400. She cannot borrow. Lisa is not her friend anymore. She still owes her neighbors, and her mother is dead. Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby. The crowd applauds. Customer bastard and bitch approach the bar. Customer bastard wants a single shot of house vodka. Neat. Cheapo. His bitch wears a black eye with pride. Gives Effie an "I got a man, what you got" look. Effie wants to laugh, but she does not. Glass, vodka. Customer bastard changes his mind. Wants ice. Cold fingers. She fixes her smile in place before she raises her head, turns the lip lights all the way up to snatch your man at your wedding red. Serviette, drink. Bitch wants a beer. Customer bastard slaps her. Bitch drops like an overripe pawpaw underneath the bar. Effie's smile remains set. Her lens glow Barclays blue. Bitch rises like a sunset in reverse, sobbing.
My laughter is genuine, but it introduces my question. You got a man, I got a man, what you got look. I am familiar with that look, Josh. Hello, my darling. Good evening. Thank you for the reading, baby. So tell me, I am sure you are aware of your own dark humor. It is something that is paramount in this story. It's not the only element of it, of course, but it is very darkly funny. And I'm sure people are starting to appreciate that already with the reading. Talk to me about dark humor. Are you consciously doing this? Because funny like sex is hard to make happen. So does this feel instinctive to you, or is it something that you're working on consciously? Talk to me about your dark humor.
I think it's hella instinctive. I don't think it's anything I planned beforehand. A lot of my best work always starts out with me trying to, be honest and dark. And then halfway through,
yes.
Well, halfway through, I always find something really funny, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's interesting," And that's where I find the truth. It's always when I find like a little bit like that I think is hilarious about the situation, and I write that in. And then when I recite it to myself, I always think about the scenario. Like with this story, you know, just the idea of her cheeks glowing light, you know, bright in front of this man. I mean,
But
a
it's
lot of
not
this,
working for the pedos anymore.
yeah, exactly. Because that was the thing. I thought about the cheek lights, and I was like, oh, okay, they're bright. But if she's older, they'll just look a bit weird, like someone who's, you know, trying to hang on to her youth. And it, obviously, she'd recognize that. And it seemed as I walked in a bar, and that's when I wrote the story. And it was a show bar where people would kind of either kind of chat up the customers or be unbutton their bra in some ways to get tips. It was for me all about like taking that particular scene and stretching it to the end. What would be the end goal of this? AKA, what if capitalism can just completely run through this entire scenario? What would appear after that? And that's how the story came out.
The importance kind of exaggeration, both to art, but also to humor. I mean, are you happy if people leave this laughing their heads off, or do you want us to feel something else?
Well, I think humor is important. It's like I feel if people are laughing about it, then it's gonna stick in. I think for me, like a lot of like the more salient, the truths I hold close, they're usually from comedies or, you know, like bits of like comedian stand-up bits of, and I feel like it's not necessarily whether the message is dark or heavy or serious. It's more, you know, does it stick with you? Does it challenge you? And humor does that very well, I think. Yeah, so I'm totally happy with that, I guess.
Is there anything that you want us to particularly pay attention to away from the theme of dark humor with this work? Something you want to have left us with, a sentence that you're particularly proud of, a theme that you think, oh God, they didn't get that, I want them. What do you want us to remember about Green Eye?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because check it here. When I first wrote this story, I was a student for Leone Ross at Roehampton University. Yeah. And I gave it to her. And I remember at the time, she was like, we have to get this published. Here's a couple of magazines, but I got too impatient. And I went off and did my own thing. And kind of like, was it 2-3 years ago, you came back and said, oh, okay, I'm doing this collection, I'm editing it, have you got any stories? And I was like, oh my God, this is a chance to put Green Eye. But in that first version, there was no Barclay's eyes. People were using because I wrote, at the time when I wrote it, people were using credit cards, and it was the old ones where you swiped and blah, 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 blah. And so in Green Eye here, I was got the original version. It was all about cards, and people would tap their cards on machines. And that would be how they printed it. So when I went back and read it, I was like, society has overtaken my story. So I had to then kind of like scale it upwards. And I guess with that kind of like as a challenge that came to me with this story, a lot of the things here might seem fantastical, but I didn't even imagine a world where we would be tapping our cards and our phones to print, and yet that happened. So you might read this and think, oh yeah, you know, what's it called? People implanting cybernetics into like a dark version of cyberpunk into themselves as a means to try to sell their services more, or the fact that we would have to, you know, if you read the story, you're going to see what ingredients in that drink, and it might seem a bit too far-fetched, but
not
yeah, not really.
It's not really.
In-state capitalism is going to kill us all.
My darling, thank you so much for sharing the work with us. This is the one that I chose to begin the book because it's dark and because I wanted people to have a laugh.
Yeah, them in the beginning.
So I wanted to show you off, as I wanted to show all of you off. Thank you very much, my love. Thank you. We are now at the end of the readings. Before I pass back to Kadija and Reynaldo, I am simply going to say this really quickly because I think this is important, and many of the other writers that are in this collection are in the room. So I would like to acknowledge, as editor of this collection, all other 15 writers not reading tonight and their work. I want to shout out Aisha Phoenix's beautifully understated Bat Monkey, Katie Massey's horrifyingly dystopian Hue and Cry. Want to talk about Chantal Oakes and her profoundly disquieting Quite Literally. Ronnie McGrath's aptly dark Contraband. Jada Pearl's totally heartbreaking sci-fi story, The Rust. Want to talk about Judith Bryan's beautifully tender, that word again, De Novo. Patricia Compa's controlled and chilling story, The Skin. Akilah Richards's utterly terrifying and weird Newlings. Weird is a good word from me. Alina Azadeh's completely politically relevant story, The Beard. Want to shout out Melissa Jackson Warner's deeply empathetic Sukuya. And Ione Smallhorn, I think you're in the room, Ione, your heartbreaking First Flight story. And Patience Agbabi's uncompromisingly forensic Digital. Peter Kalu, I think you're in the room as well. Hello, darling, if you are. Your gorgeously riotous story, The Fall of the House of Penryn. Claudia Monteith's no word out of place story, Devoted. And last but not least, Irenison Okoje's incomparable Daishuku. As editor, I want to begin hopefully a whole year of me saying thank you to all of these hugely talented writers. Thank you for being with us, guys. I'm going to pass back to Kadija and Reynaldo.
Thank you, Leone, and thank you all for reading those stories, the bits of your stories to tease people. As you know already, you can tell we're going to run a little bit over time, but such is life. I'm sure you're all enjoying this. What interested me just now, listening to Joshua talking about, you know, not being able to imagine the way that people were using their cards, and it came up in his story. You know, you always have these stories of publishers missing things. I missed a story. Nnedi Okorafor, who many people might know, she sent me a story when I was publishing an anthology about 20 years ago. And she had this girl in Nigeria, a 12-year-old girl, sitting in a tree, talking on a phone. And I thought, how unrealistic is that? Was not interested in that story. Thought, how can somebody have a mobile phone sitting in a tree? Didn't work for me. See, and you may miss these things. And of course, you know, many years later, people are doing that. So yeah, it's really interesting, and you'll get that. I've mentioned that with like Alina Azadeh's story. It's just, oh my gosh, The Beard. I started reading a bit at a festival and I had to stop because I thought to myself, these people are going to think I'm reading a newspaper article when it was a story. You have to read this story set in Iran. Mind-blowing. But what I'm going to do is, I was going to ask the writers a question, but what I would like to do instead, now that Reynaldo Anderson has actually, he read these stories with such richness and wealth and wrote about them in the foreword, I'm going to bring him back in and just throw it out to him if he would like to engage in the writers in any way. So in some way, starting off our Q&A. So you get to start it off.
One thing I'm glad, yeah, as I listen to everybody write, I reminded how, and I reread Gemma's short story again before today, and it reminded me of my aunt. We had her funeral recently, and you know how at a funeral, how you always look and sound better in the funeral than then when people actually talk about you at the repast. And you know, in the funeral, everyone says all the nice churchy stuff. But I remember at the repast, we talked about how fun my aunt was. And I remember how my aunt was the person who introduced me to the artist Prince when his first album came out, Soft and Wet. And so then out in the garage, even though most of my relatives, I was a professor, I joined one of my relatives who's a police officer, another one who worked in the healthcare industry, and we all smoked a joint out in the garage. And the younger cousins kind of laughed at me because I guess that weed has been upgraded in recent years in terms of what, when it hits, the smoke hits your chest, how you react to it. And I thought, and the term over here in America, when Gemma, I think the word is, how are we going to be ratchet in the future? You know, in terms of the cussing and behavior, we act like it's, when, if you notice in a lot of speculative stuff in science fiction, there's no cursing, everybody's very proper. There's no kind of, you don't see the gritty side of life that much. And they never think of people from a certain background having fun in the midst of all the stuff going on. And this, and this idea of bravery, of being brave to do this work, because I think a lot of what the Glimpse is a part of in the current speculative moment, I think a lot of the theoretical stuff is being done. But now you have the writers and creative people kind of filling in the canvas of how might we be loving? Like we're having discussions now, my co-founder, John Jennings, we're talking about we really love the work and in our relationships of Black women. And we like certain different types and sizes of Black women. What is her hair gonna smell like? How are they gonna be shaped? How do they look? Their skin tone and all these other things that we find kind of limiting in the visual side of speculative production in terms of what is the kitchen gonna smell like? Because I can't imagine a world without gumbo. Because in terms of crawfish and crab meat and all these other kind of things, where the spices and food of the future, what is that's going to taste like? And that's what writers and artists do. They help describe us potentially, or even what kind of drugs are we going to use in the future, in terms of our leisure time, even if we're in whatever kind of capitalistic system, whatever, in our leisure time, how are we going to be having fun? And I think the other thing we're talking about, I know as an organizer, a theoretician, I have a balance between darkness and light. And the way I was developed, because I was raised by my father, because my parents divorced when I was a kid and all that. So I had a very certain way of looking at life. And he was a military man. I was the equivalent of an Imperial stormtrooper with the Marine Corps. So I guess in the speculative world, yeah, the younger version of me was more like Killmonger from Black Panther. And there are certain extensions you would not have want to run across me during the Cold War. But as I think of the recent Wakanda movie, I'm that get it done type brother. But then as Brother Parks talks about learning to embrace vulnerability in terms of having bravery with vulnerability, because doing all of this work and creating what we're creating, being vulnerable to different experiences and people from different backgrounds, and not being afraid of the unknown, and having some tenderness with it in terms of not looking at people in a certain way who may be less fortunate through no fault of their own, and so that to survive whatever happens next, there's going to have to be a balance of this bravery with vulnerability in terms of how we deal with our humanity during what's to come, of these times that are to come over this next decade, that seems like every 90 days something's happening, whether it's something related to artificial intelligence or things that are trying to peck at our humanity as we understand it. And so that combination of bravery and vulnerability is going to be needed for people to put that down on paper, put that down in pixels or however they do it, to remind people of these different ways of being in the world. I was so glad with Peter's work. I first got exposed to Peter Kalu's work when I read his book, Black Star Rising, in the late 90s. That was the first Black European science fiction novel I ever read. And I was like, wow, because up until then, I didn't know anybody Black in Europe even wrote that kind of stuff, because they, and so that's why I always tell people, I wish that somebody had made a movie about Black Star Rising, even if it's an independent film, in terms of what Peter's trying to say in that movie. So I was so glad that Peter's was in this collection. And I first met Peter in Manchester when I was writing the foreword. Peter was the first Black British writer I met in person in Manchester. That would have been fall of 2015, when they had this meeting of speculative writers and creative people in Manchester that was hosted by Afrofuturistic UK. And I met him walking the street, and he was such a gentleman in terms of the way he introduced himself. The other writers that I can see this term that I'm coming up with, after Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
I had told my friends.
I like that term very much.
Yeah.
It's after Commonwealth. This really what the glimpse represents is after Commonwealth. Now, the angry Black American side of me takes a lot of joy in after Commonwealth as being I'm kind of anti-monarchy, anti-whatever. So anything that happens to the monarchy that's bad brings joy to my heart in the wintertime. And so that's the interesting thing about the diaspora experience. Like one of our greatest thinkers on this side of the water, W.B. Du Bois, who writes the short story The Comet and all this, I wasn't until later I understood he had a particularly strong antipathy towards the British, you know, in terms of, and he brings this out in his writings, and a lot of the way I think in terms of this side of the water, how we engage a lot of thought is actually under the influence from German idealist philosophy in terms of how we wrestle with that sometimes. And so we always have this kind of, it's this flow of ideas that circulates the Atlantic from Africa to the Caribbean, to Latin America, to here, in terms of how it mutates through this type of ecosystem that we now can deal with each other in seconds across this vast body of water is amazing. And so I'm thankful for the entire collection. Yes.
Yes.
After,
I'm just asking you to finish. Thank you. Yeah, you were just saying you're thankful for the collection. Sorry, I was interrupting you.
Yeah, that's what I call it, after Commonwealth. You know, in
I
terms
love
of,
that Nee has put in the chat, after Commonwealth, AC, after Commonwealth, anti-Charles, augmented Callaloo.
There you go, asking for the food. I know
We're still inviting people to ask questions if they want to put the questions in chat, but we can happily talk to each other for the next 10 minutes or so while we wait for people to be courageous. There must be one of you out there among the many who would like to ask a question of any of our writers.
But while they're doing that, can I ask all the writers before we forget, before people have to go, can you let us know what your latest project is, latest book, latest whatever? Please, Nee. I've already told people you've got a fantastic, including yourself. Nee, I've already told people you've got a fantastic novel coming out, but tell us more, please. Well, tell us what you want to tell us.
Yeah, I have a novel coming out with Peepal Tree. I'm not actually sure when, because I haven't sent my edits back, which I will do shortly. It's called Asuka, and it happens in a non-existent Caribbean island, Spanish-speaking Caribbean island, and it combines lots of African diaspora history, but it's its own kind of thing. Yeah, so I've got that. I've got a collection of short stories called The City Will Love You, which I kind of was crowdfunding for, and I kind of abandoned because lots of life was happening, but I'm going to pick up again. And I'm currently researching connections between Africa and the African diaspora in terms of philosophy, language, and stuff like that at Harvard's Hutchins Center. So some stuff will come out of that too. But it's more importantly, glimpses of the moment, and I'm loving it. I was really interested, well, we'll come to questions. So let everyone talk about their project now.
Come through, but I also want people to talk about their projects, but questions are coming through.
But let's since we started on the projects, let's finish the project.
Let's everybody go through quick and speak a project if one occurs to you.
I have an album coming out in April, a single coming out in February, album coming out in April. It's under my name, Joshua Idehen. I mean, if you go on, we released an EP in November last year. So if you like spoken word and house music, I am your guy. And there's a whole mixtape coming out in April, and I will be performing hopefully in as many places in the UK as possible. So yeah, you'll see my face.
I just wanted to say as well, when you read out his bio and he's like being published alongside Linton Kwesi Johnson, and was it Anthony Joseph as well? This is because this is the first anthology that Inscribe published was read, and he's between those two writers. So I've already nailed him and said, your first book coming out has to come to me, right? Because I published you in those two writers. So I'm just, that so excites me. And, you know, a lot of the writers who've been published in the anthologies, you know, they've been published in the poetry and the fiction ones, which is great, like Aisha Phoenix and stuff like that, which is good.
I do want to just for 2 seconds big up Kadija, George, because Kadija is responsible for being the person who published first a great deal of us. She published my first, I think not my first poem, my poetry.
But 2 stories.
Certainly my first short stories in this life. She made me believe I could write, and I just always want to big up Kadija. I'm seeing questions. I'm seeing questions. Carmen Babalulal, excuse me if I have your name incorrectly. Carmen says, "Lovely writers. Who is your favorite writer, and who are you reading right now?" Maybe a couple of us want to jump in and answer that question. Who's your favorite writer, and who are you reading right now? Gemma or Muli or Koye, favorite writer, who are you reading right now?
Do I have to have one favorite?
Well, you could pick up the whole of the next 15 minutes, but you could choose several if you wanted.
Oh, I have so many. Celeste Mohammed is definitely one of my favorite writers. Her novel Pleasant View was out last year and has won so many things. Oh, too many to mention. I have like a whole list of books
behind you.
Yeah. So I'm reading a lot.
I am currently reading Black No More by George S. Struehler. I can put his name. It's brilliant book. It's about
please put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's a guy who invents a way to turn Black people completely white, like not even just albino, just super white, blonde hair, blue eyes, everything fixed, and it
I'm not reading that book.
No,
that's going to cause a lot of controversy.
It's a beautiful, it's the way it's written. I mean, it might not be for everyone, but for me, it's exactly what I want, because it's just kind of like satire taken to its extreme ends, and the way everybody gets shot. Like he goes after kind of like, Black liberals, obviously racist. Harlem, it was written in the 1930s, I think. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. That's what I'm reading right now.
Cool. Tim Fielder is asking us, will there be a volume 2 of Glimpse? Kadija, talk.
Yeah, I already put, I responded to him for that. Yes, we're already talking about it. There you go.
Nicholas Moore is asking us, where do you see, and this again, inviting anyone to respond, where do you see the future of speculative fiction and Black British writing? Oh, that's a big one, Nicola.
Well, one thing I would suggest is to keep the production going. Do not make the mistake that Black Americans did a generation ago and assume that you are going to be supported by the mainstream publications in Britain. That's why we're already over here talking about, now we have enough independent Black presses where it will never go away again, because things go in and out of fashion with certain types of people. And even now we're catching early kind of, we've been on this 10-year run of this Black speculative production, and now liberals, I guess, they're like, hey, can you add no, we're not stopping. Will never go away again. So I would say the Black British writers need to make sure they put some things in place that this type of work never goes away again.
A very, very, very good point, Reynaldo. Thank you. I mean,
I'm really excited because a lot of my students here in Trinidad are writing speculative fiction. It just seems a natural genre that they are moving into, and they come up with the most amazing storylines. Not going anywhere. The next generation of writers.
In saying that, Peepal Tree have published an anthology of Caribbean speculative fiction writers. So that is, check the site. We've also put those details in the back of Glimpse. It's edited by Karen Lord. Sorry?
I'm just saying Muli students are amazing.
Yeah, and the book is edited by Karen Lord. Before we go to more questions, can the rest of you just say what you're doing in case people have to zoom off? And put those details in the chat too. So Muli, what are you doing as well as teaching people?
Okay, I've just finished a novel called The Bridge, which I absolutely love. So I'm in the editing stage. I will be sending that out soon. It's kind of a hyper-realism novel, as in it's realism, but it's kind of weird. I'm also in the middle of writing a young adult fiction that's going to be part of the world that 3 other writers, Peepal, who is one of them, he's just had one drop published. Melvin Burgess had 3 bullets published, and as part of that world that they've created, so I've got a young adult speculative fiction on the go, which really excites me. And I'm also looking at writing, I'll send more details out about writing a textbook on Black writing, which I think is missing.
Good. Koye.
Yes, I am currently working on a novel in stories. I kind of phrase it as a Black Atlantic novel. It sort of starts in 60s Brazil, touches on a host of characters in the US as well as Nigeria and of course the UK, and how their lives all intersect around spirituality, more specifically Yoruba spirituality. So I'm working on that, and that's going well, and hopefully I should have that wrapped up this year. Kadija, as well as
He knows I'm always bugging him. You guys think I've been bugging you. You don't know. I really bug Koye. Like, when's it coming out? When's the short story collection? That's what you're going to mention next.
The next, and then I'm also working. Children's stories actually part of what I call a series of stories. Most of them are called actually children's stories. I'm like, if visual artists can be like untitled for their work, why can't I do the same? Why can't I have similar? Why can't I create a series in the same vein? And so I have a host of these stories that actually look at children and kind of children as sort of this blank canvas, and how actually childhood can be like a really kind of scary and dark time for us because of that, right? And the role that trauma plays, and our experiences shape who we are. And so, yeah, those are my two main projects this year.
Desiree Noel is asking us for new, young, aspiring, unpublished writers like myself. What advice would you give them to enter the speculative fiction published world? Anyone got any quick and practical or maybe esoteric suggestions for Desiree, who's asking us about entering the spec fic published world?
Get in touch with Kadija, because she too is responsible for my first ever published story.
I was so excited with that. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Will there be workshops for Glimpse as well for the next Glimpse?
Sorry, Gemma, you need to tell us what you're doing because you've got something going on tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. So I have a workshop tomorrow, actually. So if anyone is kind of at the stage of just wanting to move forward on an idea that they have and aren't maybe sure about how to kind of get past themselves, that's tomorrow. It's for people who are aspiring authors, and it's for people who have maybe already been writing, but it's kind of a safe space. So I'm going to put the link in the chat again. So check that out.
I think the larger suggestion, Desiree, is to find ways to get involved with your community. So whether that is workshops, whether that is responding to calls for submission, whether it is attending events like this and asking questions like you're asking, an important thing is to make connections with other people who want the stuff that you're putting out there, who want to encourage and support you, who want to tell you that the work is not yet ready and you need to work harder, whatever it is. There are a lot. I think the thing is to get into community would be my suggestion.
And can I also add, I was hoping they would be here today. There is and Nee knows about this because I think he was a judge for their first prize. There's a prize for speculative fiction writers of African descent. The deadline is the 6th of February. It can be a short story. It can be a novel excerpt. We do have it in the link of our newsletter, but if people want to know more about it, just you can email me on Inscribe Writers, or if you look, is it called Future Worlds, Nee? Yeah, but you're muted, but he's nodding his head. It's called Future Worlds. And it's actually one of the supporters of it is Adjoa Ando. So yeah, it's really, and I think it's nearly all women who've won it so far. I think so. But yeah, so the deadline is the 6th of February. But if you're not sure, you want more information, message me. Yeah, and Reynaldo has put in the link of Sheree Renée Thomas, who is an absolutely amazing person. I know these guys have all bigged me up here, which is wonderful. I need to big up Sheree. She came over here like early 2000s to come and work with writers in the UK on speculative fiction. And she's edited amazing anthologies. So aspiring writers as well, read this work that Sheree is doing. She does her own work as well. She also edits a magazine and yeah, edited fantastic anthologies. I mean, it's great. So please look out for her and read her work. And yeah. So
you do know that I want to get towards an end with the following question, right? Which is Carmen. Thank you, Carmen Babalal, again for asking us. She says, "What are your favorite meals?" And Nee is already in there. Some kind of soup. What soup was it, Nee?
I think that's Koye.
Oh, Koye, excuse me. Okay, excuse me. So sorry, Nee. Yes. Koye is saying agusi soup.
Agusi soup. First
Oh no.
No.
I mean, I could kind of, you know, really kind of be really controversial and throw this in, and I know what certain people are going to say, but I have to say Sierra Leonean jollof rice. Okay.
That clearly has some history.
Wow. Wow.
Don't even wave your hand, because don't even wave your hand.
Wow.
Thank you. And
wow.
There you go.
Wow.
I know we have to wrap this up soon.
Look at the
so I should have
time.
the last word. So
Look at the time.
Last word.
No,
Okay.
let's go quick round then. So Muli, Nee, tell us your favorite meal or food.
Fufu with groundnut soup.
Very good. Yes,
I love
Muli.
groundnut soup.
What you saying about
Doubles.
which?
Doubles.
Doubles. Yes. Thank you very much.
Bubbles?
Gemma is like
What's bubbles, love?
doubles.
Doubles is it's 2 bara, 2 flatbreads with chickpeas and slight pepper and lots of other things on it. It's a very Trini street food. It's mwah.
Cool.
Gemma, you're also saying doubles, or are you going to choose something else?
I'm gonna go for doubles cousin, which is roti. I love a good roti, especially when it has the dal inside. A good roti is amazing. Bad roti is disappointing.
Yeah.
And very like heartbreaking, but it's my favorite.
And how wonderful is it the idea of combining speculative fiction with food? You know that I would respond well to that. What is your, Josh Dallin, what is your favorite food?
My mom's fried rice when she's only cooking for family, because then she doesn't hold back on the pepper. It's like we're going to the end game, you understand, a deep zone.
Yeah.
Everyone stays out because it's just everything burn. And it's lovely. Just that with some super malt. It's a one thing of hers that I really want to learn how to replicate, because you know that is, for me, it's kind of like nothing else reminds me of mom like that rice.
Carmen herself, who asked us the question, is saying curry, crab, and dal puri. That is her.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very nice indeed. Okay.
So who else?
Ione says, who is Ione Smallhorn is one of the writers in this collection too. She says her dad's curry seafood with roti.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who else have our contributors? Have they mentioned? Has everybody mentioned their favorite food? Reynaldo, what's your?
It's a 3-way tie.
I feel like you're gonna say gumbo right here, because the comment you made earlier.
All right, first my mother's fried pork chops with collard greens and gravy and mashed potatoes, and then in the second, it's a tie with gumbo, and then I guess for entertainment, watching Jamaicans and Trinidadians argue over roti, because I favor the Trinidadian roti, but the Jamaicans like saying that they're better than everybody else. So I enjoy watching.
It's like you favor the Sierra Leonean jollof rice.
Right on this one. I'm sorry.
So I enjoy the big island, small island argument as I try to gobble up the food when they argue.
So once you've had a Juman's roti, you're not going anywhere else. Trust me.
People, I'm just giving a time check. We're now at 10 to 9, so we're going to wrap up soon. Have you said your favorite food, Leone? Did we miss it? Did you say your favorite? Okay. Cool.
Jamaican patty, not any patty that you can find in this whatless country. Jamaican patty, real Jamaican patty, where you get and you drink with a grape soda when you're coming home from high school. That patty, no other patty. Don't send me no patty recipe. Don't send me no link with a good patty in
What you're
Deptford or
describing
a
is
good patty in
nostalgia.
Brixton. Exactly so. What do you mean? But if I go to Jamaica tomorrow, I can't get it. You understand? I cannot get it in this country.
Yes, but you won't be in you won't come from high school though.
Hello, don't tell me that. I'm still 16. What do you mean? No, nothing. Nothing.
So just
I love it, I
just
love
to
it, I love it.
close, I would love to thank everybody for attending, and just to thank everybody all the writers. One of my favorite editors in the world, Leone Ross, my new best friend editor, Reynaldo
Can I ask a
Anderson.
question?
Sorry.
No, it's carry on.
And thank you very, very much to Writing Our Legacy, to Amy and Nuria. And just let people know as well, I'm working on, let us have a festival towards the end of the year, but I'll keep people informed about that. But yeah, the British Library, as I said, they're also doing some things around the work of Mallory Blackman. And I think they're also doing a bigger exhibition as well on fantasy and science fiction. It's all going to be coming out this year. So, you know, keep in contact with us. And yeah, this has been a wonderful evening. And the link will be available for people as well. So let us know if you need that, but we might just kind of send it out anyway to Eventbrite. So that's it, I think.
We said it before, guys, and we'll say it again. The only reason you keep us alive and you keep this literature moving, we have to say it, is by purchasing. If there's anything that got your attention this evening, a story that you want to continue, go buy the book. There's absolutely no better way for you to support these writers. Go and buy the book, buy it for your auntie, your granny, your cousin, buy more. And if you can't do that, because we know life hard at the moment, tell people about it.
Mm-hmm. You can purchase it from the Peepal Tree website directly. You can put in the link Glimpse20 to get your discount. We would really appreciate that. You know, please buy Black. If you're not even going to buy it from the Peepal Tree website, to get it from an independent Black online bookstore, right? If you don't see it on their website, ask them for it. Also bookshop.org, because then they have a promotion and they will you can actually nominate some money, their donation, to go to a Black-owned bookstore as well. So please buy Black, buy Glimpse.
Yes.
Good night.
Glimpse. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, crowd. Thank you for
You
staying.
guys, wonderful.
Thank
so
you.
much.
That's awesome.